We ready? All right. All right. So a couple of weeks ago, Ed asked me a very interesting question. And in our English-based Bibles, he asked me as to the meaning of Malakhi 4, verse 2, where it says, "But to you who fear my name, the Son of Righteousness shall arise with healing in his wings, and you shall go out and leap for joy like calves from the stall." And it's not going to be 4:2 in these because Torah is different. So Malakhi in the Tanakh only goes to the 3rd chapter, but it has all the verses. So this would be, let's see, 19:20, verse 20 of chapter 3. And there was a question as to the Son of Righteousness, with everything that we've considered about the worship of the Son, and why would this be in there, and we talked about it just briefly, and we said things. Well, the word for son is shemesh, and it shares the same consonants as the word shamash, which means servant. So we could interject that in there and say, "But to you who fear my name, the servant of righteousness shall arise with healing in his wings, and you shall go out and leap for joy." And whereas that makes sense in the verse, it doesn't make sense with the rest of the verses. So I said to myself, let's just take a look at the entire book of Malakhi and go through it and see what we find out by the time we get to that verse. So let's have a talk with our Elohim, and then we'll take a look at this book. But Master Yahweh, we thank you for this time together, and we thank you for this time to study your word. We ask now that you will open our eyes, open our ears, and open our hearts so that we can see what your word tells us, hear what your spirit instructs us, and that our hearts will understand all of it. And we thank you for it all in the name of Yahshua. Amen. All right, so Malakhi. We like to affectionately call it Malakhi. So this book is the go-to book for pastors who want to motivate their congregation to tithe, because it has a little bitty couple of verses that talk about tithing, and then everything else is dedicated to the important topic of the book. But that being said, the concept of tithing is in no way related to the message of Yahweh that's found within this book. It has, when we read about tithing in this, it has nothing to do with giving a 10% of anything, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. So we're going to talk about this book. We're going to go through this little bitty book in its entirety so that we can understand what it is that our Elohim is telling us. Now, the name Malakhi means my messenger, but it can also mean my representative. And from this, like we say in helical times, that this was given to Malakhi to talk to the children of Israel. But today it's talking to us as the messengers, that we have to understand from the beginning that just like Yahshua, we too are messengers and representatives of Yahweh Elohim. And as such, we have a responsibility to the world around us. So that's the first important point that in this book of prophecy. So we start with verse 1 that says, "The burden of the word of Yahweh to Israel by Malakhi." The word used here for burden is masa, that more specifically means tribute. It also means a message. So we could read either the tribute of the word of Yahweh to Israel, or we could read the message of the word of Yahweh to Israel. Now the root of masa is nasa, that means to uplift or to lift up, as in giving encouragement. It also means to support and to sustain. The word debar, word, but it also means commandment, promise, purpose, and amongst a whole slew of other things. All of this is from Yahuwah and is given to Yisrael, to those who are wrestling with Elohim, and to those who are established that Elohim prevails in their life, that Elohim is bigger than they are. This is the instruction of Yahweh Elohim, because it says Al Israel, to Israel, and in the direction of Israel. So, but we see in the Lamed and the Aleph that we find that it's the instruction of Elohim that is what brings this message. So, this verse does not say by Malakhi, but rather it says in the hand, biyad of Malakhi. It is in the messenger representatives, it's their responsibility to share this message. It's been given into their hands to share this message, to be the representative of Elohim. This particular message has been given to us to share with those around us. It's a message of Elohim, and we are representing Elohim. So, if we take all this from this first verse and kind of put it together, we could say this message is an encouragement meant to lift up, motivate, both the one wrestling with Elohim and the one in whom Elohim prevails. This message contains a commandment, a promise, a provision, and a purpose, all from Yahuwah Elohim, and is given into the hand or hands of his messengers who are his representatives. Again, it has nothing to do with paying 10% in anything in this particular book, and we're going to get to that shortly. So, verses 2 through 4 say this: I have loved you, says Yahuwah, but you asked, in what way have you loved us? Was not Esau Yaakov's brother, declares Yahuwah, and I love Yaakov. But I have hated Esau, and I have laid waste to his mountains and his inheritance for the jackals of the wilderness. If Edom says, we have been beaten down, let us return and build the ruins, Yahuwah of hosts said thus, let them build, but I will tear down. And they shall be called the border of wrongness. And I'm not sure what it says in here. Wickedness, the border of wickedness. And the people against whom Yahuwah is enraged forever. So, there's a lot of words there. He says he hates Esau, but he loves Jacob. Now, if Jacob means supplanter and deceiver, how can you love a deceiver and a supplanter? Esau is a representation of the very carnal nature that goes contrary to the word of Elohim. So in verses 2 and 4, we find that there are two types of people to consider. One of them is the reprobate Esau and the supplanter deceiver Yaakov. Yahuwah despises Esau but loves Yaakov. Why? Because Esau will not make teshuvah in order to change. Once they've established a reprobate type of mind, they're not going to go back, and they're not going to change. We read in our history of Yaakov that as soon as he found out that it was displeasing to Isaac, or in the history of Esau, that he went right out and married all the Canaanite women that he could possibly find, whereas Esau did what his father said and went to Laban, to his family, and married from there. So Esau will not make teshuvah in order to change, while Yaakov will. Deception can be reversed if one is willing to listen, to learn, and to apply the truth of Yahuwah's word to their lives, removing supplanted falsehoods. Probably just about everybody in this table has believed something for a long time, and you've come to a realization that what you believe was actually a falsehood, that it was a doctrine that had been developed that went contrary to Torah, and through a lot of pain and through a lot of struggle, you've changed. You've let go of those supplanted falsehoods. This is why we go back and forth from Yisrael to Yaakov. Like we said last Friday, that Yaakov is the only patriarch that goes back and forth from being Israel and being Yaakov or Jacob, and whereas all the other ones stay consistent. So this is kind of an idea of double-mindedness, that we go back and forth from the deception and the doctrines that have been supplanted in our lives to allowing Elohim to prevail. But it's a process of growing, and it's a process of learning. So when we read verses 5 and 6, say, "And your eyes shall see, and you shall say, Great is Yahweh beyond the border of Israel. A son esteems his father, and a servant his master. And if I am the father, where is my esteem? And if I am the master, where is my fear? Where is my reverence? Said Yahweh of hosts, to you priests who despise my name. But if you ask, in what way have we despised your name?" So verses 5 and 6, we find that once we truly perceive, we will understand, and then declare that a relationship with Yahweh will take us beyond the boundaries of simply saying that Elohim prevails. We say that Elohim is bigger than us, but there is so much more to our relationship than simply saying that Elohim is greater than I am, because once we begin to develop a relationship, it encompasses everything in our lives at every time in our lives, and love for Yahweh our Elohim begins to flourish. So it's more than simply having a fear that Elohim is going to depart from us, or it's more than simply having a reverence for Elohim. Now we begin to develop a relationship as we would with a loved one. So it's a very special thing, so that Yahweh will take us beyond the boundaries of simply saying that Elohim prevails. In this, we must understand that we are very much unaware of what is to be fully, or what it is to be fully in covenant with Yahweh. We don't really have a clear picture of exactly what it is to be totally and completely in a covenant relationship with Yahweh Elohim. And that's something that our finite minds at this time can't conceive. But there will come a time when we will go beyond the boundaries of Israel, of Elohim prevails. Now verse 6 is a statement that we have to reflect on daily. Yahweh asks a question, and it deserves our best answer. It says, "If I be a father, where is my honor? And if I be a master, where is my reverence?" Why would we ask these questions? If we say, well, my relationship with Yahweh Elohim is a good relationship. But then you have to ask, what have I done in my day-to-day life that has in some way transgressed his instruction? Am I showing reverence by not fully walking with my Elohim? And myself, I can say, no, I don't. And I doubt that anybody at the table or any of the classes could really say, yes, I show reverence for my Elohim every single day at every waking moment of the day. We are human beings. We transgress. We speak curses into our lives without even realizing it. And when we do that, that's called a lack of faith. And in a sense, it's a transgression of the first three commandments. We transgress the fourth commandment because we don't find our rest in Elohim, because we don't want to believe that the bell will chime. I keep telling myself, self, when we get there, turn the phone off, but we don't want to, we get to the point where it's not intentional, but we blurt out negative things. We have to really catch ourselves and ask, if Yahweh is my Father, am I honoring him? Am I trusting in him to get me through my situation? And if he is my master, do I reverence him to protect me like a master, like a good master would protect his servant? Okay? Am I being the servant that I should be for my master, even? But we see the ignorance of those who claim to be his ministers and teachers, because this is what this word for priest is kohanim. Kohanim, yes, it means priests, but it also means ministers. It means teachers. And we see the ignorance of those who claim to be his ministers and teachers, but they not only avoid his name, but they also despise it by refusing to acknowledge it. They say, how have we despised your name? Yahshua answered this question at Yochanan 4:22, at John 4:22, when he said, you don't know what you worship. When we insist on keeping to something that goes contrary to the word of Elohim, then in a sense we despise his name, because his word, his Torah, is called Yahshua. When we read, it's called his deliverance, it's called his redemption, it's called his restoration. This is a name for the instruction of Elohim. Now the results of this are expounded on in verse 7, when Yahweh says clearly, you offered polluted bread upon my altar, yet this is not comprehended. It is not understood that in offering anything other to any other name is not offered to Yahweh. And thus they ask, in what have we polluted you? Making mockery of Yahweh and his word leads to the following perception. The table of Yahweh is contemptible. It becomes this way because the worship that is offered is defective and weak. And let's take a look at verse 8, and then we're going to compare it to verses in chapter 3, verses 8 through 11. That we jump ahead a little bit, but at least we won't have to go over those verses when we get to them. But verse 8 says this, and when you present the blind as a slaughtering, as a sacrifice, is it not evil? The Levitical law is clear. If it's a blind animal, don't offer it to Elohim. And when you present the lame and the sick, is it not evil? Bring it then to your governor, to your leader, to your boss, and see if he would be pleased with you. Would he accept you favorably, said Yahweh of hosts. When you present the blind as a sacrifice, when you present something that you don't understand, a false doctrine, as a sacrifice to Elohim, as a service to Elohim, when you give it a half-hearted effort, or even worse, when you give it an effort that is totally sickly, that's weak, is this not evil? So we compare this to verse 8, 9, and 10 of chapter 3. I'm sorry. We compare it to the misrepresented tithing verse in chapter 3. And it says, will a man rob Elohim? Yet you rob me. You say, how have we robbed you? In tithes and heave offerings. You are cursed with a curse, yet you rob me, even this whole nation. Bring you the whole tithe into the storehouse, that there may be food in my house. And try me now wherewith, says Yahweh of hosts, if I will not open to you the windows of heaven, and pour out on you a blessing, that there shall be no more than sufficiency. So, all right, so let's give him our tithe, and he will bless you abundantly because we've given him our tithe. So when we see this tithe, we automatically think money. This is the Esau mentality. Tithes here indicate the fullness of our strength in seeking Yahweh Elohim in truth, and the heave offering represents our being willing to give him the first pick of the best of ourselves. Where do we find the heave offering? We find it when they bring the first fruits. They bring the best that they have and they wave it before Elohim. That we bring the best that we have and we wave it before Elohim. But the tithe, 10, represents again the Yod, power, ability, truth, that we bring him our truth, power, and ability in its fullness, and we offer him the best that we have. Okay? Are we only willing to offer the blind for the sacrifice and the lame and the sick? Do you see a connection here? We have to bring everything that we are into our service of Yahweh Elohim. Yahshua said not to store up a treasure here on earth where it's eventually used up, but to store it up in the reign of Yahweh where it won't be. You know, the pension Yahweh Elohim has is a magnificent pension, but we only have to build it up with. So, say, in this, can we grasp verse 10 with more clarity? We'll go back to chapter 1 that I just lost myself. All right, we'll go back to chapter 1. So, and now, this is verse 9, and now entreat the face of El to show favor to us. This has been done by your hands. Would he show favor to you? Said Yahweh of hosts. Who among you would shut the doors so that you would not kindle fire on my altar for nothing? I have no pleasure in you, said Yahweh of hosts, nor do I accept an offering from your hands. If you are only going to give it a half-hearted effort, then Elohim isn't going to even bother with it. Okay? And this is he's telling this to Malakhi to pass it on to Israel. And in our helical loop, it comes to us to understand it and to pass it on to those that we minister to or that we teach. That we have to focus on giving Elohim everything we have and not just a half-hearted way. So from the rising of the sun even to its going down, my name is great among the nations. And in every place incense is presented to my name, and a clean offering, for my name is great among the nations, says Yahweh of hosts. So, obviously he's telling us that he is great. And if he wants to toot his own horn, then Elohim can do that because, you know, like he told Job, he said, who created everything? Who made all the stars? Who made everything? If he wants to say that from sun up to sundown that his name is great among the nations, then he can say that. But more than that, we have to understand that there is nothing more beautiful that deserves our praise more than that name. That we have to realize also that within Scripture we are told to call on his name. We're told to praise his name. We're told to trust in his name. And a multitude of other things that involve that. So, but, verse 12, he goes on to say, but you are profaning me, and that you say the table of Yahweh is defiled, and its fruit is food, it's despicable. And you said, oh, what a weariness, and you sneered at it, said Yahweh of hosts. And you brought in plunder, and the lame and the sick. Thus you have brought in the offering. Should I accept this from your hand? Said Yahweh. Then he goes on. Well, let's just go on and we'll talk about going through verse 2. But cursed be the deceiver who has a male in his flock and makes a vow, but his slaughtering to Yahweh is what is blemished. For I am a great sovereign, said Yahweh of hosts, and my name is feared, it's revered amongst the nations. He is comparing he is comparing the laxity of keeping Torah at this point, saying that we've come to a point even where some people say that the Torah isn't even valid. 14 reinforces the point that we read in verse 8. And 14 again it says, "But cursed be the deceiver who has a male in his flock and makes a vow, but is slaughtering to Yahweh. He brings something that's blemished. His sacrifice to Elohim is something that is blemished." Then in chapter 2, verse 2, we're going to see the value of understanding the Shema as opposed to not understanding it and taking it to heart. What he says is, "And now, O priests, this command is for you. Now, you ministers and you teachers, this command is for you. If you do not hear, and if you do not take it to heart, to give esteem to my name, said Yahweh of hosts, I shall send a curse upon you, and I shall curse your blessings, and indeed I have cursed them because you do not take it to heart." The word for hear that he uses in this verse is Shema. That if we don't perceive it, discern it, understand it, apply it, obey it, and take that to our heart, that we are basically setting ourselves up for hardship from Elohim. That we have got to take it to heart, because only the word of Elohim can change our heart from being unclean to clean. And we remember that Yahweh said that the condition of the human heart is evil from its onset, and that every imagination of it is evil. But only Yahweh knows it, and only Yahweh can provide the means for it to change. But we have to make the decision to Shema, to listen, to understand, and to apply it. Verse 3 is the result of not understanding and applying the Shema in our lives. And very simply it says, "See, I shall rebuke your seed and scatter dung before your faces, the dung of your festivals, and you shall be taken away with it." It says not even in keeping the festivals, if we are not perceiving what it is, then it is no more than animal offal, basically, is what he's talking about. That's the level that it's at. "And you shall know that I have sent this command to you as being my covenant with Levi, said Yahweh of hosts. My covenant with him was life and peace, and I gave them to him to fear, and he feared me and stood in awe of my name." Now, in this, in 4 and 5, we understand that Yahweh established his covenant with those who revere his name. They revere him in everything at every time. When we revere the name Yahweh, we are revering our Elohim in everything there is, at every time that there is. And we say, well, how do we do that? We do it by answering the first questions. Have I really honored him and esteemed him as a father? And have I really revered him as my master? So, and we go back even farther than that when the question that Elohim posed to the Adam, where are you? And there's a question again that we're always asking ourselves, what is my spiritual condition? What do I need to change? How do I need to adjust it? We say, well, we're busy all day and we've got this to do and that to do, and you know, in all honesty, we lose sight of this. And whereas there's nothing wrong with losing sight of it when we're busy doing what our day-to-day chores or day-to-day jobs ask us to do, there does come a time when we have to sit down and say, where am I? Let me look at the game plan for the day. Let me see where some of the obstacles were. How did I handle these obstacles? How can I handle these obstacles better the next day? Okay? Everybody with me? All right. Good. All right. So, where were we? My covenant with him was life and peace. Okay, we read that. The Torah of truth was in his mouth, and unrighteousness was not found on his lips. He walked with me in peace and in straightness, and turned many away from crookedness. For the lips of a priest, the lips of a teacher, or the lips of a minister should guard knowledge, and they seek the Torah from his mouth, for he is the messenger of Yahweh of hosts. Okay? So